now someone's got to save them. Save the children. And if you say that love the answer, why don't we begin? Or will we just end?
Hi, I'm Evelyn Polk, and welcome to Visions for a Child's Heart. November is National Adoption Month, and as you know, Visions for a Child's Heart provides services to foster and adoptive families. But this month, all of our programs are going to be focused specifically on the issues of adoption. Today, our guest is someone who's going to share some of her personal story with you, and I introduce you and welcome Ms. Dr. Robbin Rasbury.
Good afternoon, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Sure, thank you for being here.
Yes.
Actually, we first met, I was just sharing with our staff that we met a couple of years ago and had not spoken since then, and through just circumstances, as I say, as God would have it,
Exactly.
we reconnected, and it's just right in timing. So we're going to actually have to split our interview up into like 3 different segments because we have so much to talk about, and you represent so many aspects of adoption. So we're going to start, if you don't mind, like with your childhood experience. You yourself are an adoptee.
Yes, I am.
And at what age did you realize that your parents were not your biological parents?
When I was 13.
13?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, 13.
How did that come about?
How it came about that my brother, I have a younger brother who's also an adoptee. I knew when he was adopted, I was part of that process.
How old were you when he was adopted?
I was 6.
Okay.
I was 6.
And he was
2.
Okay, so there's a 4-year age difference.
Yeah,
4
years. 4-year age difference. And so we were sitting in the kitchen one evening while in New York, and both my brother and father were asleep. My mother and I were talking about my brother, and I knew that he did not know that he had been adopted. So I was talking to my mother about the fact that I think it's time for him to learn about his adoption. I was 13 at the time, so I say 4 years.
He was 9.
He was 9. And I was saying, you know, I'm thinking that it was important for him to, you know, hear that. So as my mother was saying, well, I'm not sure if it's the right time, I was looking at her, and all of a sudden, I don't know what it was, but I said, am I adopted? And when I looked at her face, it was almost like the look on your face.
Wow.
It was that she kind of paused, and she said, yes. I paused, and I said, oh, really? Because for me, I think the reason for me the impact of it wasn't, you know, a very strong one, was because I saw my brother being adopted, and I saw how both she and my father treated him.
Which was favorable.
Which favorably. It wasn't about being adopted, that you're different, that you're part of the family.
So it didn't have a negative.
It did not have a negative
stereotype or connotation to it.
Exactly.
For you.
Exactly.
Good.
So it was a matter of fact, too. I felt kind of empowered because I had wanted a brother, and I'd gotten him.
Oh.
So, you know, that kind of also, I think, was, wow, this was something that was a positive experience.
Special.
It's very special.
Okay.
So what I was doing at the time was just basically asking her the story. You know, how did I end up in adoption? How did I end up, you know, in the system? How did I come to the family?
Wow. That's interesting because usually if you hear someone, most stories we hear of a child learning of being an adoptee, especially at a later age, usually has a negative impact.
Exactly.
So I'm really glad to hear it's being something positive. And that's why we have our program. That's why we're doing so that it can have a positive impact, and people won't have, there's a pride that can come along with it.
Right.
You know, and the same thing we do with our foster kids, because it doesn't have to be a negative, even though everything has some joy and some pain in it.
Exactly.
So what is the story as she told it? Was it difficult for her to share that story with you?
Yes, I felt that it was difficult, but she did share it.
Okay.
So she just told me the story, and it's always about, everyone has an adoption story about how we ended up in a family. And my story was that my birth mother was living in the South. She herself was she was engaged to marry a man in Northern California. She was at a special family event or party, and that she had a relationship with him that she was taken advantage of by an old boyfriend. So it was taken advantage of. It wasn't saying that there was a rape, but it was a taken advantage of. She became pregnant after that experience. She went and moved to Northern California and told her husband-to-be that she was pregnant. He married her, said he would take care of the baby and her. 3 months post my birth, he said he could not take care of me anymore. So she was forced to put me up for adoption.
Wow.
So it was a voluntary relinquishment.
Okay.
And this was in the mid-50s.
Okay.
Yes.
So by action, it was voluntary. Emotionally,
Right.
it was involuntary.
Exactly.
And we'll talk about that in another interview.
Right.
Wow.
And that was the story.
That was the story.
That was the story.
Okay, okay. So, how did that impact you, hearing that story?
I felt for my birth mother. I felt that this was not her choice.
Okay.
And so I felt that she probably, I could understand that she was married to a man, she had to make a choice. So in some way I empathized with her.
Okay.
That was how it was again. Again, initially when I first heard, that was my...
Okay. Which also is a slightly different twist, because most adoptees initially have this total sense of rejection.
Exactly.
And you use the word "put me up," which is even still better than "gave me up." And I always like to say "place," because to put into place is more of a gentle. Because when you say "give up," it's like discarding something.
Right.
And that's one of the terms that I really work hard at getting the general public to use differently, because it's just the whole way that we speak is a reflection of how we perceive, our children, and who grow up into adults, and that's something that you carry with you.
Right.
Wow. So that was your mom's story.
Right.
Okay. Now, was your dad a part of that as well?
No, as a matter of fact, he wasn't. Remember, I said he was asleep.
Okay.
So the next day, I went and asked him about the story. He gave the same story.
Okay.
He said, oh, he was shocked too, because I was the one that was the initiator about asking. So he wasn't prepared for the fact that I was going to ask him that question.
Okay.
So he gave me the same story.
Wow.
And I just again, said, okay, I want to find her.
Okay. Did you sleep that night? I'm just thinking what it's like to be a child and to get some information and things change, even though it wasn't traumatic for you at the time.
Right.
Do you remember that night?
I don't remember that night.
Okay.
I don't remember that night.
Okay.
It's that all I remember is that moment
Okay.
of sitting in the kitchen and hearing that, yes, it was me too.
Okay.
And so I don't remember how, in that sense, of what that first night was like.
So you had the empathy for your birth mom. You said you wanted to find her.
Right.
Did you share that with your adoptive parents?
Both.
Okay.
Right. I said it that night when my mother shared the story. When I said that, I saw pain in my mother's eyes.
Okay.
When I said that I wanted to find her, she said she would help me, but there was something there that I could see maybe it wasn't going to be something that she wanted me to do.
Okay.
That was my feeling.
Okay. So
she didn't say it.
She didn't say that, but so what was your father's response?
My father's response was the same thing. I will help you, but I didn't see pain.
Okay.
It was a different reaction to even telling the story, and then when I said I wanted to search.
Okay. So I know that eventually you did start the search, but it was many years later.
Right.
So what happened in the interim with those thoughts or feelings and the need to make the connection?
What it was periodically come up. When I was with my peers, I would talk about it with a couple of friends. Only a couple of friends in high school knew.
Okay.
And those are two friends that I still have contact with today.
That's special.
And so sometimes I would ask them, what was I talking about back then about it? And they said, oh, you would just share that you had been adopted, and told the story. But I never did share what the impact was around shame, around when I told the story.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so that was where that came up.
So, and that was one of the questions that I did want to ask. What impact did that have? But let me go back a little bit more. Extended family, community, neighbors, did they know? And if the ones who did know, did you feel anything from coming from them?
Right. No, I didn't. For same race adoption, so everyone in the family was African American. So, but what for me was it came up around family gatherings.
Okay.
Extended family with grandparents, with cousins, aunts and uncles. And when we would have these special meetings or dinners, holidays, what I would notice the conversation was around how everyone looked like each other. And I would look around the room and notice I did not look like anyone. And so in that sense, I felt that difference, and I didn't quite understand it.
So was it in skin color, hair color?
Skin color, hair color, hair, texture, body, look,
Okay.
And even though I would be told by my grandmother, I remember saying, oh, you just fit in this family. But I never understood what that meant. I never quite understood what that meant. You're one of us. You're one of us. I never put that together with adoption. Okay? But I never felt different. I felt like I was just one of the,
So on an emotional level, you didn't feel different, but physically, you felt something was different. What about your brother?
And my brother, he also had some of those feelings, too. He and I just more talked about his adoption and what was going on with him. I didn't really talk much about mine.
So interestingly enough, you were talking to your mother, inquiring about when to tell him, and I laughed when you first said that. I said, okay, you were even being a little therapist, social worker even then. Some of us are just born with that gene. So it started off with you trying to make sure that he was taken care of and being made aware of his adoption, and it ended up being yours. Did they, at that point, also tell him about his adoption?
Not with me present. Not with me present. But they did tell him, yes.
So when did you and your brother have a conversation about both of you being adopted?
After I found out that I was adopted. Right, so it was around that same time.
So it was,
Yeah, it was all happening. So it's kind of surreal to even go back to even think about,
I would imagine.
When that happened exactly. But then that's when we started talking about it.
Now, was he surprised to know that you were adopted as well?
If he was, he never shared that.
He never said that.
No.
Do you think boys and girls deal, or males and females deal with issues of the like in a different way?
I think some do, yes, and I think that the girls, even like in my profession and also from my personal experience of knowing adoptees, that some males definitely want to find, others don't want to talk about it. Some of the females, or more of the females, tend to want to find the birth mother. Maybe some of the males want to find their birth mother, but also their birth father. So sometimes there is some difference. And then sometimes saying it doesn't even make an impact. It's not important. I'm happy with my life now, and
that's the way it is.
That's just the way it is.
So you were talking about the family get-togethers, feeling that you didn't resemble the people, but no one had any particular way of making you feel like you were this child that was planted into this family.
No.
No. Did you ever feel that from anyone or in the community?
No.
That's good. Good to hear.
Exactly.
Yeah, because so many people's experiences are different, and even in the process of my writing my book, I'm coming to some parts that are even painful for me in terms of how my own family responded to my adopted child, and I found myself getting angry, even though it didn't happen to me. It still happened to me because they were mine. And
I think part of the reason too is that my father's in the military. He's an officer in the military, so we traveled. So we weren't around family all the time. And maybe that was part of the piece too, that I was maybe shielded on some level, but not where I think it was a conscious effort to do that.
So that was your outer experience.
Right.
What about the inner experience that you have? You mentioned a few minutes ago about the shame.
Right.
When did that started to manifest itself?
When I started talking about the story about being with my birth mother for 3 months. That I was born, she kept me for 3 months, and then now we talk about giving me up. And it was that, what was wrong with me? Was there something that I did that maybe had even made him not want me, her husband?
It made you unacceptable.
Unacceptable, right? That there was something. Maybe I cried too much. Maybe I was colicky. Maybe there was something. So the impact of hearing that I was adopted, and even though my parents were, I never saw them treat me any differently, but then at the same time wondering, was it really real? Was it really authentic?
Wow.
But at the time when I was that teenager, I didn't have those words until now that I can reflect back.
Which brings me to another point that, like you said, you had those feelings, but you didn't have the words. And my experience is that kids, teenagers, and some adults don't have the words to express what's going on, and they act them out in some negative ways.
Right.
How did you express those things if you didn't have the words? How did those come out for you?
It would sometimes come out in wanting to hold on really tightly, or just all of a sudden, I can give an example, had a bicycle. I had just gotten a bicycle for my birthday. Okay, and this is around the time I had just learned that I was adopted. And it didn't make sense to me. I couldn't understand sometimes when I would have these feelings of fear, just fear that somebody was going to leave or something was going to be taken from me. And I had this bicycle, and my father said, I'm going to just ride the bike, right? And you could say, oh, that had nothing to do with adoption-related situation at all. But what I'm learning and what I've learned myself through this experience of this journey was that he rode the bike, and it was like he got it, I didn't get it. And I really had a tantrum kind of thing. It's like, but it's mine, but it's mine. And he's saying, but I'm just wanting to make sure you're safe. I just want to make sure the bike was okay. Yeah, but it's mine, it's mine. So what I was noticing is that sometimes what we do, and I'm not saying my experience is like all adoptees' experience. That's something that I want everyone to understand, that it's not my story is my story. There's similarities, but there are differences. And that in that situation, it was like I would sometimes react in ways that I felt people would be distant because I was like, but it's mine. And they didn't understand it, and I didn't understand it. So then I said, it must be because, see, the way I act, it's not the right way. And I'm going to distance people. So I have to not be myself.
So then you had to take on another
persona.
Right. And what was that persona?
Whatever I needed to be in whatever situation. There's a term sometimes called like a chameleon, and that's sometimes a term that's used with adoptees around how, I'm with you, so I need to be what you want me to be. I'm over here with somebody else, I need to be what you need me to be accepted.
Which
so that was
means
the inner term.
Burying a lot of emotions.
A lot of emotions. But then when they come up, because you can't bury your emotions very long,
They're
eventually
intense.
they're going to come out, but they may come out in ways that are not how you want them to be expressed.
Yeah, not in ways that are comfortable, not in ways that are understood or understandable. Right, exactly.
Overreaction. And so it's kind of a thing where it's not verbal, but there's, again, this cellular thing that it just seems to kind of come and just react. And then it's like, oh, where did that come from? Why is that happening? And that was, again, that was the internal experience.
So the fear of loss.
The fear of loss.
Were there any other issues that seem to have been really core to your experiences?
Trust. Trust with when someone would say they wanted to be in my presence or be my friend. With males, boyfriends, that type of thing. It would be, okay, I know you're here today, but see, love could be a charged word. Is that, okay, I was with my birth mother for 3 months, and mothers love their children. So if she can give me up, you'll give me up too.
It sort of reminds me, and this is a little off, but my brain just goes like this. I think of songs.
Right.
But I think it was an old blues song. I don't know if it was B.B. King or someone ever said, nobody loved me but my mother, and she could be jiving too, or something like that.
Exactly.
And like we always talk about, well, nobody can love like your mother, but people don't understand that if you didn't have that bond with your mom, that could have a whole series of negative associations for you, and so that we carry that. And I remember you mentioned cellular level, and I really believe that we all have some subconscious, subliminal emotional imprints and memories from times that we can't even consciously recall. And I think when you mentioned that, I talked about even just being a premature baby. And I think, you know, people talk about gestational times and periods.
Exactly.
There's something the infants experience on a level that cannot be expressed, but I don't think it ever leaves.
No, I don't think so either. And I think as we get older, it's just being able to recognize that that is what's going on and normalize it as opposed to making it something wrong.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So was your behavior as an adolescent ever out of control, or probably not with the parents that we had in those days, but
but I had the healthy fear. You do what you're supposed to do. You know,
That's
you do
right.
what you're supposed to do, and then everything will be all right. You get privileges. So no, I did not. I went to school, got good grades, peers, followed the rules. So did not do any acting out in high school, junior high or high school.
What about in your young adulthood? Did you have any acting out or self-destructive behaviors at all?
Not destruct. I think where it was interpersonally, within, like I said, dating, where when involved with men, it was a hard thing to trust and to be in relationship.
The reason I ask you that because I think a lot of people don't act out as kids, because I told someone, I said, you know, I was great as a kid and adolescent. I said, I think I'm just not living my adolescence now. I got crazy when I got in my late 20s and early 30s, and I think it was just a delayed reaction and response. And I sort of laughed, and I said, I think that's probably why I like working with teenagers now.
Right, because you understand. And I think, too, it was just more, when I say the difficulty with the relationships, is I would make sure that it would end. I'd want to leave it. I'd want to leave it.
So that you kept the power and the control. It's like, you're not going to leave me. I'll leave you before you leave me. I'm not going to give you a chance. Wow. Wow. So I know at some point, how old were you when you decided to actually seek out your birth parent?
When I went to college.
So you were 18?
18, 19. And I was a little nervous, though, about this because, again, whenever I would think about it, and that's when even the story, I would not talk so much about the fact that I was in her care for 3 months. And that's really critical for my story, about how I handled this as the years went on. That I was a little hesitant because I said maybe she's still going to reject me again, that she wouldn't be open.
So in our next interview, we're going to talk about your search for your birth family. So we hope that you'll tune in to see the interview following this one. But before we close this one out, we have about 3 minutes or so. Is there anything that you would want to say to any young people, even adults, who have been adopted, found out that they were adopted, or may have known all along? Anything would you say to adoptive parents? And my big concern is with the village, because sometimes the village doesn't have an understanding. It can be sort of cruel out of ignorance. So is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yes, there's a couple of things. It's like if I'm speaking to the community, is being very sensitive to the words and the language. That when you're talking about adoption, there's a lot of teasing that goes on when you're talking about family members. Well, you know, you feel so different, you must have been adopted. So they'll say to a sibling, but if you've got an adoptee in that conversation or around or in that room, that's going to also make them feel like, again, there's shame around that, that that's not a good thing. And not being afraid for adoptive parents, and especially for same-race adoptions, is that part of adoption is around building families, and you don't have to talk about adoption. You don't want that to be something that's an experience that you have to keep talking about. But understand that even in a same race, the child is going to look at you and see where they belong, see if they fit, see if they match you. And if they look at you and they can see that they don't look like you, even though people are in the community saying, boy, you look just like your mom, you look just like your dad. Well, guess what? I'm told that by my stepmother and everything. I look like everybody. See, again, the chameleon piece, that's where, you know, you have to pretend like, yes, that is my mother, that is my father. So I would think for adoptive parents is keep the conversation open. Don't wait for the child to talk to you about it. about their feelings, and realize in family gatherings, this is where sometimes the feeling is, I don't belong. So just be sensitive in that way.
And what would you say to the adoptees?
And to the adoptees is that this is my story. I know that there's similarities, but there's also differences, and not to feel that I mean, adoption is wonderful, but we all know, too, this is not our first choice, but understand that it's okay to be able to say that and to find others in your community to support you in being able to share your feelings, and that it's really okay.
Wonderfully stated. And I like when you say it's not a first choice. And I shared with you a story once when my son told me he wished he had never been adopted. And someone else might have been offended by that,
Right.
but I wasn't, because my response was, I wish you hadn't either. And it wasn't that I didn't wish I had adopted him. It was that we all wish that the circumstances which determined the need for adoption had not happened.
Right.
And so when we talk about the adoption process, just like life, there's joy and pain. Everything, has a consequence. So I appreciate your sharing that.
And what you just said, I think that's really important, too, for adoptive parents to understand that when your son or daughter is saying that particular statement, to never think that it doesn't mean they don't love you, and that they're not happy being in your home, because I wouldn't change anything for my journey about being in my adoptive family.
I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people say, well, you don't have to be here then. You can pack your bags and go. It's like, no, don't go there, don't go there.
Right.
It's just like telling someone whenever they're mad in a marriage, well, I'll divorce you then.
Right.
This has nothing to do with that.
Right, exactly.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk in our next segment about your search for your adoptive parents. So we hope that you will join us. We hope that you've gotten something of value, sounds like someone else I know, from this interview. And we look forward to seeing you the next time on Visions for a Child's Heart. Thank you.
Someone's got to save the children. Rachel's weeping for her children. Rachel's weeping. She's weeping, weeping for her children. Rachel's weeping. A mother's weeping. Rachel's weeping. A mother's crying.